Hope everyone's enjoying our lovely mid-July weather here. Personally, I'm really digging it. This is kind of like a second summer for me, so I'm going to take a road trip. I'm going to leave on Friday. I'm going to hit all 10 provinces, and I'm going to come back here November 19th at 6:47 p.m. And that might sound a bit ridiculous, but to me, the idea of presenting a product plan or a product roadmap that forecasts 3 to 7 to 9 months in advance and predicts to the day when you're going to be done with all of that effort is equally as absurd and equally as self-delusional. And so I want to talk a bit about that. So I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of great companies as a co-founder, as an early employee, and while doing some research at UW. And throughout all of that, I've taken a very, very detailed, very nuts and bolts approach, which you're going to see through my slides. I'm the kind of guy who I don't really just kick the tires on something when I get into it. I pop the hood and I check the spark plugs on it as well. So I've taken that kind of approach to managing products, launching products into the market, which I think I've done 6 products, from pretty much zero to into customers' hands. And it's kind of developed a lot of this approach. So first of all, we tend to develop these plans, and people come up with great Gantt charts or great launch schedules that within about a week to a month of time, they just kind of fall apart. And really that's a lot of different ways that reality just kind of steps in and derails our plans. And the main ones that I've seen that people tend to follow are, we start with the best of assumptions. We assume that the plan is going to go perfectly without a hitch. We're never going to have to rebuild the code base. The boards that we design are going to work out just fine, and the design agency is going to come through with a perfect design the first time through. We also tend to get into a bit of negotiations, where the people actually doing the work who have experience with it have to kind of chat with the people who are more customer facing or more investor facing, and those people sometimes are a little bit more persuasive in how they suggest things. And in those cases, you'll sometimes get estimates that are not really informed by the people who've done the work before, they're informed by what people want to see. And lastly, we forget that everyone else is in the same boat. We're all equally horrible at planning things, and we kind of assume that when our supplier or our graphic designer comes through, the 2-week estimate that they gave us is airtight. It's rock solid. It's not something they threw together 5 minutes after we emailed them at all. And you start to build a plan with all of these assumptions in place. And what it leads to is lots of scenarios where you say, okay, we're gonna take 3 months to get our product into the hands of customers. 9 months down the road, you're still not there. So a few ways that I've come up with and that I try to promote for getting around this is stop looking in such detail at your plan. Don't try to break things down into what's going to happen for this 2-day stint and this 3-day section, and look much more broadly and start to think with a lot more variability. Accept that you don't entirely know how things are going to go. And so in this example, the PCB design task could take 2 weeks in the best case. That extra yellow block there is a 3rd week, which is the more pessimistic case. And you can see that this all trickles down where we look at the optimistic and the worst case scenarios for all of the tasks in the project. Now this gets a bit tense for some people when you come down to saying, yeah, we could have our first PCBs ready in 7 weeks, or it could take 17 weeks. That's a bit uncomfortable and scary for some people to deal with. But it's really the nature, if you're getting into a startup, that is the nature of the beast. I mean, you are doing this because you're jumping into the uncertainty. Either it's a task that you've never done before, or it's a task that nobody has ever done before. But it's part and parcel with the job, so being upfront about that just kind of helps everyone and removes a bit of the pressure that can really cause things to get kind of shitty in a startup. The other side of this is that it's very difficult to actually keep this going. Typically, in the early days, I would keep spend a lot of time working in Microsoft project, get a Gantt chart out, and kind of hold to that for a week, maybe a month if I was lucky, but things would fall apart really quickly. So one way that you have to do that to keep things going is keep it simple enough that you can update it in about 5 to 10 minutes at a time, and keep everyone else abreast of it. Keep everyone else aware of the plan and accept the fact that things are still kind of up in the air, but there is a boundary on how chaotic and how unknown they are. And so in terms of accepting the chaos, a big part of that is accepting that there's some stuff that you're good at. There's some stuff that you've done before, but there is also a lot of stuff, especially when it's your very first product that you're ever putting into customers' hands, you really don't know how long it's gonna take. And make that distinction between the two types of tasks and try to get the expertise of other people you know, other people in the community, or even rely more heavily on your more experienced employees when you can. And so this was a survey that I would put out to project teams when I was running meetings. How likely, how stable is the assumption that we're actually gonna hit whatever aggressive launch date we put in front of ourselves? You know, is this a very reliable Jenga tower, or is this something where one little small detail gets pulled out and the whole thing's gonna come tumbling down? And being willing to consider that option, that things are really precarious, and being able to talk to your employees and, you know, kind of find out where they think we have the weak links is an extremely, sometimes challenging, but can be super enlightening for learning where you can shore up the whole execution plan. Now, there's always gonna be a challenge with this, and this comes back to the negotiation phase, because your CEOs, your head of sales, and your product managers all want to get product in the hands of customers as soon as they can. And like, I do not want to be interpreted as saying that we shouldn't do that. That is extremely important to building the right product. Getting your product in the hands of customers is going to show you all the ways that you think were the right way to do things that really aren't. They're gonna do things that you couldn't even comprehend that will break your product miserably, and that's super useful information to have. So you absolutely need to do that. You also have to do that in a way that it doesn't create a fire and a massive panic for your developers every time you have a demo that just happened to be scheduled 2 hours ago, that they have to drop everything to deal with. So one of the best ways to do that is to try to have some people who are basically magicians when it comes to using duct tape and bubble gum to fix the problem. Get someone who can be the Johnny on the spot, fix things for that demo and let it all kind of fall to pieces after that. And try to minimize how much of that hits your devs who really want to do the best job that they can. Now, all of this is really tough. When you're a co-founder of a company, you've got way too many things on the go. When you're a developer, you're trying to spend as much time as you can to meet these often very aggressive deadlines that people have given you. So why is it worth spending that time, especially to maintain a plan afterwards? Well, the main reason is that if your customers, especially your early ones, are on board with the shitty website that you've put out to begin with, they're probably gonna be patient enough to accept that if you can take a couple more weeks to get the product into the right state, they'll be willing to hold off and let you do that. And this is often seen as a sign of maturity. I think anyone who's been involved with or backed a Kickstarter, where they just kind of keep kicking the can down the road every couple months, can respect a company that says, we don't exactly know, but we think we'll be ready in this time frame. Secondly, there's a lot of time spent on this, but writing shitty code, doing a poor design, getting minor league people to do certain tasks in your business right now can lead to huge mistakes down the road. And it's up to all sides of the project to ensure that that doesn't happen, that you're actually doing things as much as you can in the proper way early on. Because that does save time, and it saves huge amounts of stress down the road. And I think the biggest part of this is that your product dev team wants to do the best job they can. I've never met an engineer or a developer at a startup, whether on the software side or the hardware, whether they're fresh out of school or very experienced, who doesn't care really passionately about the product that they're building. And they want to do the best job they can, but they will do that within whatever limitations and constraints you put on them. So if you say you've got a week to put out this feature that they could spend 4 weeks on, they'll do it. But they'll feel very frustrated about it because they're going to have to break all kinds of rules for themselves, and they probably know that down the road they're going to have to deal with fixing it. And that will work every once in a while for little pushes, but when you have to do that constantly for about a year, that really drains your team. And if nothing else, I think that we owe it to, if you are developers, to put some pushback on. If you are the people kind of pushing schedules, we owe it to the people who are doing the work on this to be as honest as possible about this and just like embrace the uncertainty that comes with this really crazy adventure that we're all on. So that's everything from me. Looking forward to your questions.
All right, questions?
Hey, this is more of a statement. I guess I could frame it as a question, but I just won't. When you were talking about uncertainty, when you're setting up schedules, and you had your last one was between 1 and 4 weeks.
Yep.
I come across this a lot, and I think what that often tells us, and I'm sure you'd agree, is that there's some things you don't know about that, and there's some risk in there.
Absolutely.
So that's probably the place to look and say, what can I learn? What questions do I need to answer? What are the risks that are inherent in this big black hole I have in my schedule? And answering those, can help us sort of at least understand why it's there and possibly even shrink that a little bit. So
for sure,
some thoughts I had while I was listening to you.
Yeah, and that is one area that I've seen a lot of people have issues with is when you have the nice little Microsoft project plan that has this nice little 9-day completion time for a task, you really don't call out the fact that that might be something that you really don't know much about and you haven't done before. And it kind of treats it in the same way as the thing that you've done 100 times before in your career or that your team is very experienced with. But having something where you can actually draw out the fact that there's some stuff that's completely new to us and we really should put some of our attention and try to bring some smart people in to help us understand this better is very, very important to actually get to like a nice, well understood schedule.
Thank you, Patrick. You've worked with a lot of startups, and I have a question for you. In all these startups, did you find intrapreneurship as an important aspect? I define intrapreneurship as the promotion of innovative, otherwise entrepreneur ideas within your organization. Is idea conception centralized with only the founder, or is it open to all people on the board?
It really shouldn't be. That is a recipe for making a 5 to 10 person company where you kind of stagnate from there. You need to have people who are willing to both promote their own ideas and in some cases stand up to the founders and say, this might be, I know you think this is the best way to do it, but there's also this alternative way. And I think that strength of personality is something that I would fit into entrepreneurship. And being able to bring in new technology, new ideas is definitely important and really should not be limited to just the founders. I mean, you want especially your early hires to be more intelligent and more educated on certain areas of the business and more aware of what's coming out down the horizon when it comes to the tech side and more open to kind of experimenting when it comes to things like company culture as well.
When you've got a process that can be very fluid, very hard to control, and you get through it, it's maybe you get a lucky break and everything works out exactly on that Gantt chart. How do you progress from continually relying on luck to move to a more systematic, bulletproof approach?
I mean, the more times you've gone through it, the more familiar you'll be with the process. And like you said, getting a more systematic approach is really important. Part of that is you realize the areas where you either were really lucky or where you maybe weren't quite so lucky and had some stumbling blocks in the past, and you incorporate that into your planning going forward. So a lot of that is kind of getting to a level of skepticism, not quite paranoia, and asking, okay, what are areas that we've stumbled in the past? Are we covering those bases? What are some other bases we might not be covering this time around? And being, again, open, transparent about asking those kinds of questions, and not being afraid when you get, responses that are a little bit uncomfortable to you.
So I agree that it's difficult to plan all parts of a project. So what I'm wondering is, have you worked with someone who is a PMP designate before, a project management professional, or would it be kind of too early in the company to bring in somebody who's designated to plan things like that?
Actually, when I was at Alert Labs, the CEO had his PMP, and we did bring someone on with the PMP designation who took over that torch from me of maintaining the schedule. So having those kinds of people does help. I would say it's a little bit more rare to find someone like that who, I haven't seen a lot of them in the tech scene here, but I think that there is a lot of benefit that you can bring from bringing this very agnostic approach to kind of taking the same process, whether it's a software app or a hardware system or anything in between, and applying that in a more general way. So I do think that there is a lot of benefit to that when you have kind of this more generalized approach, but I feel like it kind of doesn't jive the best with the chaotic and kind of Wild West ways that are part of a startup. So that could be one of the reasons that you don't see a lot of them coming into this work.
Hi, I'm here. So how can you balance out the urge of shipping the product yesterday and giving the developers enough time to design the product properly to save time along the road?
So there's a really good article from the early days of Joel Spolsky. He made Trello and Stack Exchange and a bunch of other awesome stuff. And what he advocated was fix everything both ways. So early on, just like Smile, Joel was the front line of customer service. So he saw all the requests that came in, and he found a way to fix things immediately for that customer. He also was the long-term maintainer of the code base, or he and his co-founder were. And so they made a rule that we will fix this right now to get this immediate customer very happy with us. We will also figure out the long-term way to fix it. Now, for one person to do that takes ridiculous amounts of self-discipline and organization to be able to keep both of those things in mind. I've found that it's a lot easier to do that when you have one person who basically split it into two people. So one person can be the just get it out the door kind of person, and I've been that person many times. And you have kind of other, whether it's one person or a dedicated dev team who is working on the long-term solution. So splitting it into separate people is the ideal way, but that requires that you are employing that many separate people to do it. So it's not always the best option. Otherwise, you kind of have to walk that line and do the negotiations with yourself.
Thanks, Patrick.